So welcome to Chikukwa Ecological Land Use Community Trust, who have 30 years of experience now working around water harvesting in the Chikukwa communal land and beyond. And I think that's invaluable experience, especially as we go forward and water becomes more and more of a critical issue for everybody. So we thought it would be an excellent idea to hear that experience, what's worked well, what they have struggled with here and there. And so I'd like to introduce you to Dalan Chikukwa, who's the director of CELUCT, and Samuel Chimbarara, who works with him in the community trust, working in Chikukwa communal land. So over to you, Dalan and Samuel. And we've got Johannes Mufokose also connecting from elsewhere as a backup, because it's quite a remote area and internet's not easy internet connection. So they've got a plan B as well. So over to you, Dalan.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you and welcome everybody. We will be giving you this presentation from our sister organization that also emanated from CELUCT. That's true in Chimanimani, because when we woke up this morning trying our internet, we didn't get through, realizing that just an hour before this presentation, we then had to drive 25 kilometers out of the village into Chimanimani town. Maybe before I proceed, just confirmation that I'm coming out clear from Chimanimani. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you, Dalan. It's a bit shaky here and there, but so far, just so good.
No, there's a lag.
No, we've lost you now. Unfortunately, we've lost you. Can you hear me? No, we can't hear you. I think, Mufokose, you might have to share and present.
Okay, John, let me share and present. Thank you. Can you see my presentation? Is that clear to you?
Yes, if you just put it on the present mode. Yeah, present mode, if you can do that.
I think slideshow,
present mode.
Or slideshow, whatever.
Slideshow.
Okay.
I'm trying to check where exactly.
Thank you.
Up at the top, slideshow.
Good. So let me give you
in one amazing connection to connect all of us together. Sometimes the connection, the technical connection is shaky.
There's something at the bottom right, I think you can click slideshow.
Yes,
or slideshow.
There are three icons on the left. Yeah, that's the one, number 3.
On the right?
On the right.
Mufokose, can you see that on the right there?
On my right, is that correct?
Bottom right, yeah.
Bottom right.
1, 2, 3. As you go towards the right, you see number 3, icon number 3.
Let me check. Oh. On the bottom, eh?
Yeah, next to 69%.
Oh, mine, I'm seeing my presentation.
Well, or you can click on slide number 1, double click, and it will get into presentation mode. How about you try that?
Okay, let me try that.
Did it go? No.
No, it's not. Okay, I think you just go like
You carry on like this. Yeah,
Is it
that's
okay
good.
now? It's not.
Go ahead.
Top line slideshow.
So,
Okay, and on the top also, yes, Paul, you're right. On the top, there is an icon which says slideshow. There's a button which says slideshow right on top.
I'm missing that one.
If you go to the
mine,
top.
there's
no, I think he's not seeing the
what
other.
more application.
No, you
Let
must
me
have
try
a
to
different.
expand the screen. Maybe I must have a different version altogether.
Yeah, I think let's just go with it as it is. We can see it.
See it.
I think just go with it as it is, Mufokose. It's fine.
All right. Okay, I think Dalen was at 2 kilometers from Chimanimani, the remote community.
We've lost you. Johannes, we've lost your voice.
We've lost you. So I think let's try something else. Mufokose, can you hear me? Mufokose, can you hear me? Because we're not hearing you. So I think stop sharing.
Which they have.
Which they
We've
have.
actually lost the whole connection there.
Okay. Okay, so Marie, could you share the screen?
Yes, John, I can.
Thanks a lot.
We'll still need somebody to do the presentation itself.
Okay, so let's just, if Dalen can't do it, then I'll do it. So Dalen, just checking again, can you hear anything, Dalen or Samuel? Okay, so if you come back, just jump in and let me. CELUCT is situated on the eastern border of Zimbabwe with Mozambique in the Chimanimani Mountains. It's a communal land, but actually Chief Chikukwa's jurisdiction goes over into Mozambique as well. So it was the colonial borders went right through a traditional area. So as part of the Chimanimani Mountains, it has a very steep topography. It started in 1991, the work, when they noticed that there was a lot of erosion. There were heavy storms and they were losing a lot of water and soil. And so a few young people in the community got together and they formed what they called busy bees. They had a local name for it, but it translates into, it's called Nyuchi Dzakasimba, which actually means strong bees, strong busy bees. And they started working with the community on a whole range of water harvesting practices. And they've been doing that since then. As it says here, they focus on sustainable agriculture and natural resources. And they also do a lot of work around peace building and community relations. And their purpose is to facilitate the regeneration of community cohesion and landscape through trainings and capacity building. So soil and water conservation is a big part of their work. Next one, please, Marie. So you can see the kind of erosion that they were facing when they came together. It was this young group working with members of the community, and they started digging swales, they started planting a lot of trees. There was a real community mobilization in the early 90s. And they started to see the results of this quite quickly. And now we can see what it's like in some places 30 years later. Next one, please, Marie. Next slide. Okay, so just a little bit of background. They do have, like everywhere in the sort of one rainy season climate that Zimbabwe has, they have very heavy rainy seasons and then drought years. And as I said, there's a lot of soil erosion. Unfortunately, there's also been a lot of deforestation. There's dependence on handouts from government and NGOs, the kinds of things that we see in many places, with environmental degradation threatening the lives of people living in communal areas. Next slide, please. So again, a comparison slides. So you can see that on the left was in the early 90s, and on the right is a photograph of now. And what they've done is they've managed to bring back a lot of springs, and in the process they've been able to provide many households with a lot of with water at their households. So Chikukwa is made up of 5 villages, and within each village they have a water scheme. So it's, as well as restoring the landscape, it's also brought the direct benefit of water being supplied, captured and by tanks brought to many different households. So it's been an extensive water rehabilitation work. Mufokose, do you want to take over? Are you there? You're on mute.
Yes, John, I think you can continue, John. You can.
Okay, it sounds like it's still a bit shaky. Okay, so
Hello, John, I think you can continue.
Okay, yeah, no, it sounds like your connection. So in the early days, this was the main tool that was being used all over the Chikukwa communal land, was the simple A-frame. So they used the A-frame to mark out places where they would dig swales, where they would plant vetiver grass. There was a lot of planting of vetiver grass, siting roads, and all that kind of thing. So it was been a very useful tool in Chikukwa. Next slide. Thanks, Marie. So this is Chikukwa has a center of its own, a training center, where they hold their training. And as Dallin said at the beginning, there's another organization, Tsuro, which operates in the whole of Chimanimani district. And basically Tsuro grew out of the work of CELUCT. People from other parts of Chimanimani district came to the CELUCT center for training. And a lot of that training revolved around just getting water into the ground, holding the water in the landscape, and digging these kinds of ditches and just siting access routes and just paying a lot of attention to water management. And the center itself is now an excellent example of transforming a piece of land from one which is degrading fast into one which is highly productive, lots of trees, lots of productive trees and other plants. Next one, please, Marie. Okay, so a lot of community work where people have come together and worked together to dig, because it's a lot of work initially to put these ditches in, but once they're in, of course, it's maintenance. But then that's a lot of work at the beginning and then not so much after that. And they did a lot of this through community mobilization. So it was digging these kinds of ditches right across people's various cropping areas and doing it together. Next slide, please. Okay, this is another example of the kind of ditches that they've dug everywhere and continue to dig everywhere. Chimanimani, Chikukwa was badly hit by the cyclone. Some of it held up well, other parts not so well. So it's very much an ongoing task because they're right in the line of cyclones that sweep in from the Indian Ocean. So, and they're going to be more. So it's a huge task. It's one thing to become able to handle heavy rainstorms. It's another being able to handle 750 millimeters in 48 hours, which is what Cyclone Idai brought. But they're working at it, and they're determined to make themselves cyclone resilient. So just a couple more examples of just everywhere, wherever there's a path, putting in gabions. That's the kind of thing they do. Next slide, please. Okay, so little check dams, and then where gullies appear, putting in the loose gabions. That's actually in a grazing area. Next slide, please. Okay, more examples. Again, loose gabions. Okay, and as I said, they have seen springs coming back, particularly in the 90s. They saw a number of springs that had dried up coming back. And they've also done quite a lot of work around restoring sacred natural sites that were always traditionally sacred. So that's another dimension of their work. Next slide, please. Okay, the other area, quite a large part of Chikukwa communal area, is grazing area. And before, the livestock used to wander around, and that caused a lot of overgrazing, and in turn that caused grasses to die, and then the soil to become bare and contribute to the erosion. And so they've done a lot of work for the last 10 or so years around managing their livestock, primarily cattle this is. So they bring their livestock, I think they've got 2 schemes, so they've got 2 herds where a certain number of households, one in the north and one in the south, bring all their livestock together, and they take it in turns to herd their livestock according to a plan, which particularly in the rainy season, that avoids overgrazing, because they make sure their livestock don't come back to an area before the grasses has recovered. And that started to have a lot of impact in terms of increasing the ground cover and increasing the water infiltration as a result. They also use what movable crawls. So at night, people put their livestock into a crawl in their cropping areas, and then they hold it there for about a week, 5 to 7 days in one place, and then they move the crawl to a new area, and they've got a ratio of how big the crawl is according to the number of livestock, and then they keep moving it every 5 to 7 days, and they've had excellent results in terms of crop production. So that's a kind of short-term benefit from their grazing management, along with the longer-term benefit that's happening as a result of the grazing areas becoming more, grass is growing much better. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So basically, it's the approach that they're using is the one way where they're mimicking what we see in wildlife, where large herds bunch together and then they keep moving. And that's what's happened for millions of years in savanna areas. And so they're doing the same with the livestock. So that's one of the herds. Initially, they employed some amongst them to do the herding, but they found it actually it works much better if they rotate the herding. So they take it in turns to herd the livestock. So there's a typical herd there. I'm not sure how many. It's probably about 200, 220 animals. Next slide, please. Okay, so it brings back the activity of soil organisms, dung beetles, and you can see the holes, and all of that contributes to infiltration of water into the soil. So it helps stop runoff from grazing areas. Next slide, please. Okay, there's an example of their movable crawl, where this is moving it in the rangeland, but they also do it in the cropping areas. On the right is an example. No, that's also a grazing area, but they also sometimes put those movable crawls into cropping areas. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a kind of growth. So in the grazing areas, they concentrate on areas that have become very hard and compacted, almost like concrete, and nothing's growing there. So they concentrate those crawls there, and then the hooves open up the soil, and then the water can infiltrate. Next slide, please. Okay, so there we are. That was, as it says, the presentation compiled by Samuel Chimbarara. Maybe they're with us. Maybe they can answer questions. I think we'll open it up now to any comments, anything you'd like to, any reflections it brings up. Let me hand it back to you, Minnie. I've been talking a lot.
Yes. Thank you, John, for stepping in. Marie, maybe we can close the presentation now. Technical challenges means we may or may not have our organization with us, but we could definitely have a discussion around what happens when you have livestock and you need to hold water and it's dry, and how do you bring the springs back? And if anybody has comments from even their own area or something that they would like to comment on that they've seen in the slides, do put up your hand and we can have a discussion around this as far as it goes. So would anybody like to start off first? So one of the things I can already say here is, while people are thinking there was anything further, is that what I noticed is a very similar way of having little check dams, which I've seen in other projects, where you have the little gullies which hold the water, and and those channels which bring the water to be flowing and allow it to filter underground. And in that potentially the springs might have come back, and seeing that difference between that slide where the mountains were very bare, and then after that now you can see the greenery coming back and the settlements surrounded by greenery. That is really what water does. When you bring water not just to the surface, but you allow the water to come in a way that allows it to filter into the ground. We also have Paul with us. Paul, are you there? Paul, we can. Would you have a comment to make on what you've seen in terms from the hydrologist point of view?
Yeah, have you been to England? Because we've built so many features just like that, honestly. And Chris in Stroud famously pioneered gully stuffing, where you have a swale and you pack it full of woody material. I didn't realize you'd done it 25 years ago. So there's a couple of comments. First of all, excellent that if you are going to change the landscape, you've got to change all of the landscape. It's like one big system. It can't just manage here and manage there. You have to do the whole of the system. And that's when the system starts to function. And that's when the system starts to heal itself. Because the more good things you put into the system, the more good things come out of the system. So you might not realize what you're achieving at first with all the effort, but eventually you see the benefits. I also think John's made a very good point about the rainfall extremes that are coming towards us. So we need to design our system so that it can handle high flow and low flow. In the past, we've sometimes done it just for low flows, but we need to manage our systems for high flows and low flows. And just one more point about the grazing. I've become, once again, I have to admit, I've been studying some landscapes where you called it bunch grazing, we call it mob grazing, where you put more animals into one area. And in the past, somebody says, well, they're going to compact the soil and they're going to destroy the soil, poach the soil. But I've actually seen now that it's the other way around, that if you bring more animals to a smaller area, they will fertilize the soil, they will break up the soil, but they're also working on the fungus and the microbes. You need the animals to eat everything to get your best crop back. And I've seen whole meadows of lush grass. So I think some people perceiving increased intensity of cows as a problem is not a problem if it's done properly, as you've shown. You really do compact them and you move them slowly around. You can bring back fertility to your soil. So I think that's another good message.
Can I ask you a question on that, Paul? Because I was looking at that and I was thinking, what we've normally talked about is soil compaction by having animals on the ground actually stops the water from going in. But here in the work of CELUCT, we've just seen that with the kraals and what you've just said is that the animals are actually opening up the ground to recharge more water. Yeah. So is there a difference between, does compaction occur more where the soil is wet, like in England, and less where it's dry land? Or, what is the principle at play here?
That was my perception. What we have in the UK with wet soils, and especially upland soils with lots of organic material, is we've just had the wrong density. We've had a lot of sheep and a lot of cows, and they tend to wander around the landscape making a mess, basically, and only eating the little juicy bits of grass that they want and not eating the rest. So all the cotton grass and the other things we don't like, they don't eat. So you have to bring the cows together so that they will eat everything. They will trample down everything. Everything that's left gets trampled in, and it makes this beautiful top layer. And that brings back increased infiltration. And then it gives preference to good crops that we want for the animals, either for the next year's crop, as it was pointed out, or just the grassland. But it's grassland with more varieties in it, which are good for the cows. So if you actually move these cows around, it seems to work really well. I've seen examples from all over the UK now.
So it works in both dry and wet areas if you concentrate the animals in an area.
I've seen the uplands. I've seen the uplands where we have a lot of problems with flooding and low production grassland, that the grasslands become more productive, and we've driven out the species we don't want, the hydrophilic and the mosses and things, and replace them with grass, flowers, lovely species. And the bees and the bugs have come back. So I just want to think that there's great potential in that, and it's good to hear that from Africa, that this more bunch farming has worked well.
Those slides were amazing, seeing the amount of lush grass that came back in a completely dry area with the kraals and the livestock in those kraals. Let's open it out. Is there anybody who would like to say something about what they've seen or add something from their experience of the work that they're doing back in their organizations, which links with what we've just seen?
Any comments from anyone? Any questions?
Yes, Zachary. Please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question because this can easily be done on the farms, but what about in open land? Like in the Dhaka, we have a lot of land which is bare. It is when it rains, water actually runs like as if it is even in a roof, because the earth pan is hard. It has been trampled by livestock for a long time. So what can you do that in the cultivated land? What can be done so that you can make the water sink into the ground? That is the question I wanted to ask. I think the presentation is very, very good. The other question I have seen also, there are many people digging. Are they being paid, or is it a work of voluntary? Because those are the things we are trying to grapple with here as we try now to tell people about this, what we are about to do. Maybe we can respond to that.
I wonder if anybody in the audience might have a response to that. Unless Johannes or Dalen, are you there? Walter? Maybe we'd get your question as well, and then we can respond together. Yes? Nope, Johannes, your voice is still... Nope. We've got a lag there.
Hello, I can respond to the first questions. That's okay?
Yes. Yes, now we can hear you.
Can
Yes,
hear me,
please
eh?
go ahead.
No, we can hear you now, Johannes. Of course, we can hear you.
Okay, you can.
I think the internet's playing a game with us.
Just when we can hear you, then we can't hear you. We better give it. Maybe Walter might be able to answer. I can also chip in just as well on some of the questions. Yeah, I think it's, of course, it's coming and going, so I think it's not possible.
Yeah.
Maybe they can try using the chat.
Yeah, maybe
they
you
can
put
answer
something in
via
the chat.
chat.
Yeah, good idea, Marie.
And in the meantime, let's carry on, and then we can come back to this. But John, you wanted to say something. Walter, you wanted to say something on that?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And yeah, it's a very good model to learn from, because they've been at it for 3 decades, which is very good. In respect to the question on sinking water on the open areas, I think what could be useful is to plant grasses that are able to hold water, such as vetiver grass, planting them in rows across the slope, because these grasses, because they're able to hold the soil over time, they act like a swell, like a contour ridge. So if these are planted in open areas across the slope, they eventually help to slow down the water and to allow it to sink into the ground. So that's a useful technique that does not require a lot of opening of the hard, dry ground. It's simply just planting this bunchy type of grass that can hold the soil and eventually hold the water and allow it to grow. And that should be done in conjunction with the regeneration of the natural vegetation. So there is need to have the community to agree to conserve the natural vegetation around, and then help the recovery of this natural vegetation through farmer-managed natural regeneration, where these trees that are trying to grow, usually they copies in a lot of bushes, and then the farmers help to thin these bushes so that the vegetation can regenerate more rapidly. So the combined effect of these trees that are growing and the grasses that are planted across the slope, the capacity of the land to absorb water increases, because in permaculture we have a saying that trees are water. If you love water, plant trees. So the trees and the grasses will eventually help in the harvesting of water. The question that I had is a broader one. I had the question on the cyclones. because it's, as somebody said, it's one thing to trap water which is coming through normal rainfall, less intense rainfall. But when you have got hundreds of millimeters in 24 hours, that's something else. So I think that to me brings in mind the importance of having a lot of dams on the landscape, a lot of water collection points, which small to medium scale. I think this can help a lot in absorbing the runoff from intense events such as a cyclone. So I think that might help a little bit. Thank you very much for sharing this example.
Thank you, Walter. I think Johannes and Dalen are both trying to come in. So maybe we try, if you can comment, and if you can't and it's still a lag, then we'll go to Theophilus first and then Esther next. Johannes, your hand is up.
Yes, hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, very clearly. Quick before it goes.
Yeah, quickly said. Yeah, I wanted to say maybe the communities are not paid on the second part of the question, but if they are seeing the benefits, the communities can come together, work as a unit to bring about the community transformation, like what you have seen. So basically, our communities are not paid because it's to benefit them, to benefit their community, the environment, their families at large. And therefore, no payment is done by the organization, except supporting with some little incentives when necessary, if they are ever available, like some refreshments, if they are there. If they're not there, the communities, they continue to work on their own. I also wanted to comment on the first part of the questions. I think Gowe has actually responded that it is important to use multiple approaches, especially in water harvesting, so that maybe they can support each other, especially on bare lands. And then on cyclones, like what Gowe has also highlighted, I think I would go by saying that if you love water, you should plant trees. We've realized that in Chimanimani, where areas that were not bare, where trees were there, the impact of the cyclone was not as heavy as compared to areas where trees have been somehow destroyed to some extent, which shows that even cyclones, the trees can play a very important part in increasing water infiltration to the soil and making sure that the environment is stable. Thank you very much.
Johannes, while we have you and your connection is good, do you want to say something about any of the slides that we saw, like the one that we are talking about, planting the grasses? What grass was that in the photos? Do you know that, or anything more you want to add? And then we'll come back to you, Esther and Theophilus.
Yes, you can plant grasses like vetiver grass. It's very good.
Like Walter said.
Vetiver grass at holding the soil. Especially if you put it into strips that can hold the soil and the water impact as well. It also can help with the water infiltrate into the ground. But with the holistic and land management, where you're using the animals to compact the soil, if you use that approach, grasses that have been lost, the perennial grass that have been lost, they will be regenerated and to also assist back in holding the soil and to making sure that the water is infiltrated into the ground, especially if you start with watershed areas, so that the water does not flow in big volumes to the lower land. If we work with the watershed areas going down to the lower land, it helps to make sure that the water infiltrates up and the upper part of the land. And then when you are going down, already with very little water downstream. Thank you.
So can you also plant, like we have one comment here, like in a hard pan, you can plant, can you plant productive food kind of plants like quinoa or the other native grains that you grow instead of vetiver?
Let's also plant some improvement plants like into the land, so that maybe they can improve the nitrogen content of the soil I think it's very critical that you can introduce some exotic plants or indigenous plants. We usually encourage to plant the indigenous plants so that they are adapted to the local environment. They can easily establish in that environment. So I think it's possible. But if you're looking at the holistic land holistic land and life management, we are saying some plants have been lost somehow through land degradation and erosion. But by using that livestock as a tool to impact the soil, the lost trees will regenerate and the grasses back into the fall to try to reforest, to try to regenerate the land using that tool.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
So thank you. Please stay on. I mean, your connections for voice has definitely, the sound has definitely improved. There's a question hand up from Theophilus. Would you, and then Esther. Theophilus, go ahead.
Hello. Hello, Manny. Nice to be here. I'm joining in from Nigeria. So I just wanted to ask real quick, because I love to introduce this to communities, of course, suffering drought and all. So I want to know, like, because here we have like planting seasons, talking about the rain harvesting, is it possible to practice this method on a ground that is already planted with crops? Or do they need to harvest first, and must the land be bare to harvest rainwater? Because well, the crops are not yielding well, of course, because of lack of water and all of that. And so, my question basically is, can they practice this whilst maybe a part of the land is planted with crops, and then while they practice this on a different part of their lands? Or must they harvest totally, then practice on an empty land? Yeah, so that's my question. So,
thank you. Yeah. Johannes, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, please. I think the first part of the question, that can you practice this with hello?
Yes, we can hear. Carry on.
Can you make, okay. Is it possible to practice on already planted in area planted with crops? It's not really possible to do that on an area that is already planted. You need to harvest first. Then you can use livestock as a tool to combat and improve the soil fertility of the area. And then if you want to turn that area into a forest area, definitely you need to harvest first. And then you can bring in some livestock to combat the land. Then you're not planting crops altogether. So basically I'm saying you can do the compacting first before planting, so that the crops would benefit from the soil improvement, from the compacting that have been done by the livestock. Or you can do side by side, where you are saying we have a cropping area that is impacted. Then you can also have an area as a part of a grazing area that you can also compact, and then you're not planting crops on that part of land as well. Is that clear?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Esther, please go ahead. Your hand is up. Are you there, Esther? Yes.
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to learn this. This is a very good process of slowing water and sinking it, because that's what we really need now. In Kenya, we are doing it in permaculture, but in small pieces of land where we are working with the farmers. But I appreciate the fact that this community was able to do the whole landscape, and they're able to work as a community to sink in the water and graze their livestock together and work together as a team. In Kenya, we do the same, and a lot of this has happened in Ukambani, but because it's a dry area, they build weirs, or they put gabions across a dry riverbed where they create sand dams. And when you create the sand dams, you actually create an underground water tank where you can actually have an off-take well next to the weir or the gabions. But what you do is that it recharges the aquifers. So when you do the weirs and the walls, you can have the water stored back up to 4 or 5 kilometers, and they're doing it every 2 or 3 kilometers, starting from the upper part as they go down and they have been able to green their areas like that. The other beauty about it is when you have water and you have more plants, you have more insects and more birds coming in, and that actually brings more pollination. But the beauty of birds is that they will bring seeds and they will bring more plants that were not there, but will bring from other places, and more indigenous trees start to grow in the ground. So it's a beautiful practice for sinking, slowing and sinking water. Because when you recharge the aquifers, you actually recharge the water sources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther. Those words are like music: slowing, sinking water, recharging aquifers. This is what the water school is about. So thank you for bringing that perspective in. Wonderful. Anybody wants to comment on that? And then there is a question from Marie.
Yeah, okay, after you.
Yes, Philip, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that what's amazing in seeing this presentation is that in all parts of the world, it's possible to go from a desert landscape, which is dead, there's nothing growing, into this initiation of life, and where everything is back to being in relationship, the beetles, the birds, the plants. And it's this quality that you're not just working with managing the landscape, you're working in restoring it into this full expression of existence, where all these different aspects of life are working and living together. And that this quality of transformation is what characterizes this work. It's not just managing the landscape through a certain number of steps of control. It's allowing this amazing transformation that you see in those two pictures of before and after, in which everything returns, life as we know it on the planet in all its beauty is restored from every little detail, again being able to work together in its full potential. So it's really a heartwarming, yeah, and that is the quality that this type of work addresses. And so it's really fantastic to see it in another part of the world with other techniques, but the outcome is the same.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, it is a whole landscape, holistic management of bringing life back, not just bringing the water and the plants back. Thank you for that. Marie, would you like to ask your question, or would you like, if you unmute yourself and ask your question about the rangelands?
Thank you so much, Min. Actually, I'm really impressed to see how they have been able to restore the rangelands and to see the grass which really are grown. The picture is very interesting. When you saw it, you feel like even living it. So in Africa, we have many parts of the rangeland. It's like land abandoned. I have been able to visit rangeland in Kenya, Baringo County. So it's a very big land. You have to travel kilometers and kilometers, and many people abandon the areas because of no rain, no water, and so on and so forth. So I think if we can have more presentation, more explanation about how they have been able to manage this, it can help many people in Africa, especially those pastoralists who used to move. You know the movement, you know about the movement of these pastoralists around Africa. So if they can also benefit this good experience from Chikukwa people, then maybe in Africa we can be a source of really food. We can help to restore the food system in Africa, but also in the world, because if Africa is well used, we can contribute to the food system all over the world. So for me, maybe if possible, I might request maybe next time to prepare more about how people can manage this rangeland, which took the very big surface of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Yes, it's a very important point. Even those who don't come from Africa, such as myself, you often hear of the rangelands and vast movements of people, pastoral especially. So yes, we'll look through, communities that have done some regeneration and bringing back the water on rangelands. Thank you. So we've got 3 more hands up here. One first is Eustace, then Hosea, and then Zachary. So Eustace, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minnie. I'm also very excited with the way this is unfolding out. First of all, I think I need to say a few things that have impressed me most. Yeah, you know, we do a lot of work, but we fail, at times we fail to simplify. I was excited with the term that was used when we were starting the meeting of holding the water in your landscape. As simple as that. I think those are the terms that will take us forward. I was still impressed with the attention details of the presentations. I was happy to see the beetles doing their work, implying that this land, there was no external kind of pesticide used, which could allow those small animals to survive. So I think it is good. I've also been trying to learn permaculture. And when I saw the mimicking nature, where herbivores were used as an example to learn from, and encouraging the cattle and other animals to keep in the same environment, trample and also improve infiltration. I was so happy. Lastly, I think it is the people that are so much important in this kind of work that we do. I was happy to see the 2 pictures. The one before the water work was done, and the current picture, I could see the population had increased. In the former picture, when work was starting, the trees were less, but you could see that though the population had increased,
We've lost you, Eustace. That was
he said lastly, so I think that was his last point.
Say that again, please, John.
No, that was his last point. So he
got
everything over. So I think that's fine. Thanks, Eustace. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and actually there is the fact that Eustace is back. If you want to complete your comment, Eustace.
Eustace, we got to your last point.
I'm sorry, I broke off.
Yeah, we got you now. Just your last point.
Yeah, the last point was about the last point was about the increase in the tree numbers before the intervention started, and after the intervention, you would expect that when population increases, the trees could reduce. But you could see from the pictures that the trees were increasing, implying that the people were empowered and they knew the importance of trees in what they are doing. So thank you very much for the presentation. It has been a very good presentation.
Thank you, Eustace. Thank you very much. Okay, Hosea, please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very, very nice one. And the biggest motivation here is to see the community coming together. And now my biggest question is, what was the secret of Chikukwa people in trying to bring this one at the communal level, at that landscape level? We've been able to do it at the household level, but trying to put people together and have it at landscape as one of the biggest challenges. And I'm happy to see this, and I'm really motivated by what is happening, what happened in Chikukwa. And maybe if we could get more of such, it would be really, really nice. Especially the one which is led by people, like what has happened there. And really, it's really motivating. I want to appreciate them so much. And I come from Baringo. I heard someone mentioning Baringo, and it's true. It's one of those landscapes which is quite degraded now and needs a lot of healing. If you could get such more secrets from Chikukwa, you could do a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Hosea. So anybody there, Johannes or Dalend or anybody who can give some of the secrets of how to bring it at a community level? Anybody else who might have an idea of what the secret is?
Well, I see Zachary's got his hand up, but I think Chikukwa is quite remote. Maybe that plays a little bit of a part. They've kept they had a very effective chief. Unfortunately, he died, I don't know how long ago it was, about 10 years ago, but the traditional leadership was excellent in Chikukwa. It brought people together. It created a sense of community. They battled against others to protect their land. So there's been imposition from the Forestry Commission tried to did take some of their land, and they were kind of land battles. I think that brought a sense of community. So there is quite a unique sense of community in Chikukwa, and I think that's played quite a big part. And I think Hosea makes a very good point there, that's the heart of it. And I think water and managing water in landscapes begins with that sense of community. And Zachary is going to come next. And one of the interesting things relates to land tenure. So in Zimbabwe, fortunately, a lot of land has been kept communal. So it's under communal management, and there's a sense of community. There's traditional leadership still. There's been huge pressure from people like the World Bank to privatize land, because they use this saying, tragedy of the commons. They use that to try and justify privatizing land and saying you'll get more production if people own their land, they can use it as collateral, get loans, all that kind of stuff. It would have been absolutely tragic if they had gone ahead and privatized land in Zimbabwe. You can't manage rangelands if you privatize the land. And that's one of the big problems. I know where Zachary comes from in Tharaka. In Tharaka, they've privatized all the land. And so you have small pieces of land everywhere. So I think to Zachary's question, how do you start dealing with some of these common lands? I think it's a big challenge, and I think it's an even bigger challenges in places like Tharaka. But somehow you have to bring back that sense of community, because that's what's done it in Chikukwa. Is they've enabled, and Johannes Mufakose, who was talking, his work is actually around building community relations. He's also an agriculturalist, so he's a man of many parts. But they've done a lot of work around building community relations as well. And that sense of community enables the community to work as a community. And I think, Zachary, in whatever way you can, it's how do you bring back that sense of community? I think that colonialism destroyed that more than anything. And in some parts of the continent, it destroyed it more than in other parts. So let me leave it there.
Yeah, and a quick comment on that in terms of what builds that sense of community, which colonialism has often destroyed. And we found that in India, the first is the sense of disaster. Everybody's facing the same drought. So that does bring the community into a common misfortune, but that's not enough. What really brought the community together was actually working on the landscape towards a positive goal of bringing the water back so everybody could benefit. And there was a momentum in that excitement of what can happen, that life can return, that even the naysayers, even the most skeptic people in the community actually come together. And then when the water comes back, there is a sense of community achievement. And that powerful feeling of doing it together is what sustains that feeling of we are a community together and we need to keep doing more. And this is a common principle you see from different cultures. So wherever communities sort of gone, and you do feel collected around a misfortune together, but the greater sense of community comes in doing something about it together. Zachary's got his hand up, and then Sahar, and then Walter.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think John has said some of the challenges we face in the Raqqa, but what I wanted to say is about some of the benefits which we are now trying to collect all these, and then we try to tell our people. One of them is to raise the water table. You know, when the water sinks in the ground, it raises the water table. So if there are wells or wells, they can be very shallow. In fact, there was a time in the 80s when there were there's an area where there were a lot of bows sunk, but now they are all dry. The reason is because I think the water is no longer going into the ground, it's just going overland, being lost into the river. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is saving our soils. That's what we are trying to tell people, that when we have this water seeping into the ground, then we save the water that goes to the rivers. The other thing is it's also not just about water holding, but it has everything to do with food production. So it is it's like an integrated system. Now, the last one is I have seen they are using what you call the catchment approach. And I wanted to ask a question about how do we involve the other actors? Because, okay, we have the communities, we have Chikukwa, the other NGOs there, or the CEOs buying into this idea, because clearly, what we are doing, it's not one thing. It requires a lot of what you call a multi-sectoral approach. So what are you doing this so that you bring everybody on the board so that you can work together? Thank you.
Thank you, Zachary. Shall we just quickly take the questions from Sahar and Walter, and then get into the discussion again? Sahar, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Good morning on Water Africa. I'm Sahar, and from Sierra Leone, nation's capital, Freetown. I'm a little bit sorry that I came in late, but actually it's an opportunity for me to be part of this discussion that has to do with water. Well, basically, I first of all want to give you a background to the revolution of our organization that has to do with water, and after which I'll come to catch up with the discussion I met you on, which has to do with upholding water, community engagement and all. We are a group of graduates, young graduates, between 20 and 28 years. So we've seen the need for us to come into the water sector and a social entrepreneurship form. We have seen that water is an essential commodity that can be used by every human on earth. But we've seen the opportunity that in Sierra Leone, where I'm coming from, there is still problem with water usage, water availability, and water management. There is huge reserve of water, fresh water, lake water, streams, but yet still we've been encountering challenges. One of the ways of conveying water to the people is through the sachet and plastic production, which to us we've seen that it has contributed to the pollution of our environment. If you can come to Freetown right now, which is the nation's capital, you can see that most of the time during the rains, flooding occurs. And it happens because of the sachets, the plastic that do stock in the water rails. So our initiative, primarily, while we provide clean, affordable, and accessible water to the community, we also want to see how we can green our environment, extincting the production of plastic and sachets. Yeah. Coming to the discussion proper, upholding water in our community, I think this has to do with community engagement. Like, we'll have to let the people know why do we need water in the very first place? How is water essential to us? Yeah, what can we do to reserve our waters to be used during the rains, of course, when we have sufficient ones, and during the dries as well? The community engagement there was to tackle family members, because these are the people who consume water. Of course, every individual belongs to a family, but engaging the family members, orientating them, giving them ideas, them to understand why we should manage our water and the activities we should do to preserve our water in our society for future uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar. Very good points that you make. Did you say that you're from the Sahel?
Sahelian, West Africa.
Right. Can you give the location, exact location?
Freetown. The nation's
Sierra Leone. Freetown and
Sierra Leone. Right. Wonderful. Okay. Shall we move on to Walter? Walter, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Mine is not a question, but a comment in contribution to the discussion on the importance of bringing the community together. And I agree that that sense of community is critical in working at the landscape level. And so I think one way of approaching this to build a sense of community is to get the members of the community to meet from time to time, to have regular meetings. And when they meet, the important thing is to identify an entry point which can draw the interest of the members of the community. And a tip on doing that is to look at the needs of the community. So then the community can prioritize some of the needs that they have. And then the priority need can be used now as an entry point so that the community can try to address that need together. And once the community starts seeing some success in terms of meeting that need, addressing that need, then that will motivate them to continue to work together. And then issues of landscape, issues of water harvesting can then come into the picture if they've not already been identified as a priority need. And then from there, success tends to breed success. So I think it's about getting a good entry point into getting the community to meeting more regularly so that they can work together. That's the contribution I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Right. Any other questions or comments from anybody within the group over here at the moment? Any? Yes, Paul.
Yeah, somebody said my favorite word, which was the word catchment. So we always start with the line, we all live in catchments. Okay. And it's a very natural unit of assessment. Sometimes we talk about the landscape, which might be multiple catchments, but there's always a term, our catchment, my catchment. So you can start to bind people together just by saying, where is the nearest flowing water? Where do I get my water from? Where does that water come from? And where does that water go? And in a farmed landscape, you can see that it's all tied up with how you live. So I think even if you start off with small catchments, maybe 10 square kilometers or 50 square kilometers, it's a good unit of assessment to judge yourselves and to look at progress. So even though you may have very strange administrative and tribal patterns, you can still say small catchments are in big catchments, and therefore you can start to bind yourself as a region, as a landscape. But activity maybe in one catchment first, just to prove that it can happen in one catchment, is how you get what Walter says, some visible results quite quickly.
Thank you, Paul. We have a hand up. Pardon me if I pronounce your name wrong, Bakusele. Please go ahead.
Perfectly. Hello, everybody. This is Matupa from South Africa, deep rurals in Transkei. Just to echo some of the sentiments shared by some of the speakers, we also busy with water harvesting. We are doing we're practicing permaculture. Then we realized that our area, in fact, everyone knows that South Africa is a water scarce area. Sometime, I think 2 years back, we saw in Cape Town, we had day zero, where there was literally no water in our taps. So here in the rurals, we decided to come together as the community. Then we started food gardens. Then we are using permaculture principles to collect and harvest our water, but mainly we're using rainwater harvesting methods. So one of those methods was like redirecting water from off streams, getting the water into our gardens. The water seeps, and then we dug swales and contours to control all the water that is coming. That was gonna be run off surface. But then we directed the water into our gardens. Then we started planting all the different kinds of trees and plants that allow or drain, or in fact, bring more and keep water in our sites. So I'm really interested in very, very much more happy that I'm with you guys to learn even more. We've just started about, I think, 2018, but now we're starting to get to interact with the whole world, see how people do it in other areas of the country. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Matupa. Actually, that's a really good point to say that there are many new people who've joined us today. And if you would like to be part of this forum, which happens on the first Tuesday of every month, please do put your email down in the chat and we'll put you onto the group messages that go out so you can be aware of who's speaking next, which area, what kind of method, and you can join in and have the joining in information. So don't forget to do that. John, is there anything you would like to add, say, comment, suggest?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's been really interesting discussion and how it's evolved and how that whole sense of community lies at the heart of this work. And there's kind of, it's the foundational work that if you can get that going, then we've also talked about how the natural nature starts to take over and the birds come back and the dung beetles start working again. If you can get that water sunk in the ground. So it's like, let's focus on what we can do. Let's come together as communities and do what we can do. And then marvelous things will happen. And it's so true. And you see exactly that and you hear the stories where people have put that effort into regenerating land. The same story comes up. And then, just like Esther put it so beautifully, the birds come back, the trees start growing. It's a beautiful world, but we must get those basics right. And it all starts with that sense of community.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, just the potential for life is always there, as John was just saying. Everything is there, the trees, the beetles, the cows, to come into relation and to make something flourishing and prosperous. And so it's only our choice whether we want that dead landscape or we want to nourish and hold that potential for life to express itself in all its sort of beauty and fullness.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, so very rich session again, and it's even though our main presenters, they did very well, even in spite of the internet challenges in sending us what they've actually done, and we've, that kick-started the whole discussion. Even though we go over some of the principles of holding water, but that, constantly seeing it from different viewpoints, different areas, reiterates the message, as Philip was saying and as John was saying and various others were saying, of our choice of how we hold the water in the land to bring life back. Our communities together, how we can do more and more of that, whichever part of the world we live in. We are the community. We have to do it, not just out there somebody who's experienced, saying, dry or flood. all of us are engaged in bringing the planet back to health. And it starts with our small communities in the whole catchment, bringing the whole catchment back to life. Since that starts with the first water retention system or body or tree that you plant wherever it's dry or too wet. So if you unpack it, the steps, all the steps lead back to the first small step, lead back to a rich catchment, to a rich planet. I mean, John, is there anything else we need to say here, or we can close this session today? And then remember, the next session will be in September, the first Tuesday of September. And if you want to say something more about that, John?
Well, just I think Mufakosi, Johannes is still there. So just to say thanks a lot to CELUCT and pass thanks on to the others for sharing and for giving us doing the presentation, which we just read out. So many thanks for that. Yeah, the next session will again be from Zimbabwe, but it's from the south of the country. We'll be looking at an organization that started off, sorry, my phone, started off focused on sand dams, but they've now grown into a much more catchment, as Paul was talking about, catchment approach to managing land in the south of Zimbabwe, a much drier part than the one we've seen today. The Chikukwa, where we saw today, is a higher rainfall mountainous area. Where we'll go is next first Tuesday. The first Tuesday of September is the south of the country. So we look forward to seeing you there, and please do tell anyone else. I think the beauty of these is the way these discussions evolve in different directions each time. And we are a community, as Minnie says, we're a community of practice, really trying to learn together how we can help, we can hold water in landscapes across the continent much better, and give much more profile to those who are already doing it, because a lot of people are already doing the work, like CELUCT. We just need to give more profile to some of this great work going on. Thanks very much, and see you next time.
Okay, see you next time. Thank you, everybody, and really thank you to all the communities and those who spoke and those who didn't. This, I do want to add here, this is a very free and open forum, so don't hesitate. I see new people coming in from our organization. I can see Susan, who's joined us recently. And you're all very welcome, and you're all very welcome to say, ask, comment something that you know about holding water and enriching your landscape. So don't feel shy. We are all in regenerating and bringing the water back together. And see you next time. Thank you and go well. Have a good month. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.